today to speak to us with respect to what you're doing in this area, what you're seeing in terms of the One Health in terms of pathogens, and your work as being both a vet and having a master's in public health degree, which is, I think, we've seen increasingly important. I'll just note that we've even seen some increasing importance at Purdue recently. They just established a new One Health facility in Indianapolis. It's not yet built with Elanco Animal Health. So it's becoming a vastly recognized area of expertise, an area of great importance. And we want to give you this opportunity to speak on this topic. I'm going to mute myself. Do you have a screen you want to share, Neil?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to give you, I'm going to make you the presenter.
All right, excellent. All right, can you all see that?
Not yet. There'll be just a bit of a lag.
Okay. How
Yeah,
about?
we see it. Yes, we see it. You're good.
Perfect, perfect. So thank you for the introduction. Yes, I'm Neil Vizell. I'm a veterinarian right now. I work for actually the USDA, though I should note I'm giving this in my personal capacity. I also work for a variety of other organizations in a pro bono sort of nonprofit capacity, and I'm doing this unaffiliated with those as well. This is my purely personal capacity, and for a variety of ethics reasons, I just need to make that clear. Today, we're going to be talking about agriculture, emerging pathogens, as well as pandemic work preparedness, and a few things that go into all of those different elements. So as I said, I'm giving this in an unaffiliated capacity. This is a One Health topic, which is important to note. It takes a really large body of very different, very diverse experts to bring together all the knowledge that it takes to put together into a PowerPoint like this. So suffice to say, I'm going to do my best to portray and convey everything and all the knowledge that they've generated. But for some of these things, I'm going to be sort of a lay person talking about molecular virology or things of that sort. So I'm going to do my best to portray those. Also, some of these topics are going to be a little bit, are going to verge a bit on the political nature. I'm going to do my best to portray everything in as much of an unbiased fashion as possible. Where I maybe have personal associations with different entities or people, and where that's relevant, I'll try and make that known. But some of these can be somewhat touchy subjects. That being said, some people might be like, "Oh, that's not that bad." But for some people, these will be fairly large sources of controversy. So we're going to start out with what is disease spillover. In short, disease spillover is when a disease spreads from what you call a reservoir population into a novel population. So that could be basically any variety of species, typically animal, we're talking about, that basically incubates a disease, typically asymptomatically. I don't think it necessarily needs to be that, though. And then due to a variety of factors that we'll get into later, a variety of microbes are able to spill over into an individual from another population, and then that individual will be able to begin propagating that disease among others in their population. And once you have, particularly once you have that self-sustaining propagation within that novel population, then that's what you most formally refer to as spillover. So there's a couple different spillover. Basically, is not this solely unidirectional process. You can have spillover, and typically we refer to like wildlife populations or animal populations to human populations, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that way. Once you have spillover into that novel population, you can have what's called spill back into another novel population. You can actually have that then kind of do a daisy chain around different animal or any kinds of populations back to that population that it spilled over into originally, or into any other given population that was part of that whole transmission chain. We actually saw something to this effect. I believe it was in Canada. It was somewhere in, I believe, the North American interior, where basically they found strong epidemiologic evidence, molecular evidence that SARS-CoV-2 basically spilled over into deer populations and then spilled back into humans again. And that wasn't, I believe, posed to be like a substantial source of COVID-19, at least not uh, relative to like human to human spread. But that's just one example of how spillover and spillback occurs or works. And we're going to be focusing, just to keep things a bit narrowed down, on specifically disease spillover as opposed to spillback, as opposed to secondary spillover, so on and so forth. So disease spillover has been increasing over the past several decades. And disease spillover of emerging infectious diseases have increased more than 4 times, at more than 4 times the rate of previous decades when comparing to the previous most recent 4. And here's some examples of that. Specifically, this is just a variety of spillover events, of zoonotic disease events from the past, well, basically century plus, but with a focus kind of on the past several decades. And you can see that there's quite a bit that are respiratory pathogens. A couple involve domestic species, a couple involve wildlife species. Note that pangolins are noted as the sort of possible, but not necessarily definitively identified pre-human host for SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-1, or just SARS-CoV, simply put, is kind of what kicked off a lot of our programming and kind of current understanding of how, or at least impetus to find our current understanding of how spillover diseases kind of work. So that's a really important one. And all these other ones have created, pretty big headlines and created pretty large political impetus, pretty large pools of like research funding to bring us to where we are now, SARS-CoV-2 notwithstanding. So there are, of course, natural factors that we don't at least directly influence or intend to influence that potentiate spillover or can increase its possibility of occurring. There are also anthropogenic or man-made potentiators of spillover that are really important to note and that are going to be the focus of the rest of this talk. The biggest ones that have been noted by scientists include urbanization. So basically the expansion of kind of concrete jungles, if you will, or just human inhabitances in general. And also deforestation. That's actually probably one of the primary ones that kind of leads to a lot of downstream potentiators of spillover from that. Biodiversity loss, which is essentially just a loss of genetic diversity in an entire ecosystem, as well as other forms of human development. Again, deforestation is probably one of the biggest potentiators of other potentiators, or at least kind of the starting point of a lot of others. What that basically does is it brings novel wildlife populations or relatively novel wildlife populations into contact with human potential hosts. So basically it sets up that transmission process for spillover disease as we first explained it. And yeah, basically it increases those interface points, and it can place kind of these novel selective pressures on viruses in wildlife hosts, particularly species like bats, maybe small mammals are common kind of culprits that act on their viral pathogens or viral kind of subpathogenic agents. And I see that I got a comment of sharing the slide set, and I believe that would be possible. Yes, thank you for asking. And then, yeah, sorry. So it can place kind of novel selective pressures on these viral agents that live inside or exist and propagate inside these wildlife species and can cause them to, move into novel populations, including domestic species and or humans, into domestic species and then into humans, which is what we see with things like Nipah virus, for example. Uh, Commonalities among anthropogenic potentiators is that one of the biggest ones is that we're sort of co-opting natural resources such as land, food, what have you, to transform those into things that are useful for human industry and also human food and human society writ large. And one of the biggest things that encapsulates all of those together is agriculture. It's estimated that for the past 8 decades, so basically since about 1940, about half or potentially even over half of zoonotic diseases have been associated specifically with agriculture. So when you take land, you can turn that into real estate, you can turn that into cropland, you can take it into pasture land, and any plants, animals, whatever that are going to be in that kind of wild, if you will, or undeveloped area. You can turn that into food. You can turn that into traditional medicine or other kind of chemicals, materials, or what have you that are useful for human industry. And a lot of those things fall under the kind of subset of agriculture. So this is kind of predicted spillover disease risk globally. Um, and this is compiled by a variety of researchers, including many of those from the EcoHealth Alliance, if many of you are familiar with them, or if any of you are familiar with them. This is they compiled a couple different maps that are meant to reflect where we're most likely to see disease coming from a zoonotic disease jumping from an animal population into a novel human population. And this is specifically the one that they made that is weighted towards areas that don't report as heavily or areas that don't have as much effectively research or perhaps public health infrastructure to with which to examine those potential spillover events or those risks of spillover. So basically, another version of this map, you see places like North America, Europe really light up simply because there's a lot more kind of money to do research, both from academia as well as from just public health authorities for those sorts of research, and not so much in those low middle income countries or LMICs like India and China or elsewhere. But in this map specifically, they have weighted against kind of the frequency of reporting on the suspicion that some areas simply just have a greater ability to conduct that reporting. And this is what that reflects. So suffice to say, you really see those low middle income countries that have really expanding populations into sort of formerly undeveloped areas or who are otherwise quickly developing their infrastructure, their industry, their agriculture, so on and so forth, really light up. There's a couple different mechanisms to consider as far as disease spillover as it relates to agriculture. And specifically with regard to the location or kind of the timing of actual agricultural operations, those are split into three different groups, basically. And that's outside or before of those agricultural operations, during the main agricultural activity, or inside the gates, so to speak, and then after, which is when you're like processing those agricultural outputs. And we'll get into a bit more detail about what we mean by each of those things. So outside or before, that includes all that land clearing and deforestation. And this is particularly common in the tropics. One thing that, at least in North America, we've probably seen the news a lot is that there's a lot of Amazon rainforest being cleared out for pasture land for beef cattle because they have a very rapidly expanding beef cattle sector. And that's been the source of basically concern for some groups and some populations. And in descending order of the land area that each takes, or in approximate order, it's a bit hard to get the exact figures on these. The biggest use of that deforested land is ruminant pasture land, so for things like cattle. and then growing crops for monogastrics like pigs and poultry because they're going to rely on they're not going to be able to convert kind of that cellulose heavy uh, uh, feed that just grows on pasture land as efficiently or as readily. And then also after that space for monogastrics, so like those intensive feeding operations for like broilers or for like pig pens or whatever, the land that you need for that. Uh, During the agricultural operations, it's basically everything you would associate with uh, an agricultural operation, intensive and high intensity livestock farming, particularly that with inadequate biosecurity is a potentiator of spillover. Um, it confines living and non-living basically carriers of disease, including viral, bacterial, what have you, into a pretty small area that will regularly be in contact with each other and cause primary, if not kind of secondary contact between feces and animals, animals and animals, all that sort of stuff. Um, Breeding programs and just genetic homogenization also has a pretty large impact on that. The use of antimicrobial growth promoters. This is something that's decreasing. This is maybe more than even a couple of other things has been a focus of my kind of research and study over the years. And this has the potential to basically cover up for other inefficiencies in the production system, other things that might detriment health or just feed conversion and ability to grow fast and put on weight um, for a variety of reasons that we don't always fully understand. Uh, but because it can effectively allow you not to create the healthiest system for one's animals, it can potentiate spillover and potentiate the ability of disease to manifest, exist in operation, and spread and incubate within a livestock population and potentially outside of it as well. Um, Also, in any sort of confined operation, you're going to necessarily be dealing with or having to mitigate stress and result in sort of immunosuppression and disease spread. And that's also uh, uh, important in transportation as well. I mean, anyone who raises cattle is probably familiar with like shipping fever. And basically, anytime you're sort of confining animals and putting them in a potentially stressful situation, you're going to be dealing with factors like that could potentiate disease. A quick note on solid waste. Uh, in 2014 is the last time we get an estimate from. Humans and animals produced an estimated 4 trillion tons of feces. We're going to get into a little bit more of this later as far as biomass across the earth, but basically 80% of this comes from animals, and most that's going to be coming from livestock specifically. And that's going to be expected to increase alongside population growth, and that's going to be more so with farm animals as opposed to humans for a variety of reasons we're also going to be getting into. And so after you're outside of those farm gates and the animals have left the sort of primary agricultural operation, you need to process the food. There's abattoirs and slaughterhouses where you have more points of contact where disease can spread. And then there's processing of, as well as disposal of other waste or byproducts from those animal operations that can create more and more points of contact. For example, in swine, at least, you can basically scrape their gastric mucosa and get a heparin, which is an anticoagulant from those. Basically, any of those points you have points of contact basically that can cause disease spread if it indeed exists from one population that can spread into another. So the overall effect of these kind of mechanics is that of what agricultural operations and sort of human development can do is that it chiefly among them can limit biodiversity to kind of specific subset of animal life, including us, including our domestic animals, and, which includes like livestock as well as companion animals, cats and dogs, paradomestic species as well. So like vermin species and technically also insects that you might find inside or around houses or spiders or what have you. and then the microbiota associated with all of those. And due to a variety of coevolutionary factors, you see a lot more, you see us sharing a lot more bacteria and what have you, microbes, pathogens with domestic animal species versus wildlife animal species, which is why while these spillover over events from wildlife can be rare, basically, there's just so many contact points happening and so much, and particularly viral diseases evolve so fast and can fill so many kind of micro niches within disease ecology that even though rare, it's still in a sort of paradoxical sense potentially quite common. And this limiting of biodiversity basically funnels the disease ecology um, and kind of puts it in a similar population that allows for potentially a communal sort of incubation of that disease. So the overall effects of these mechanics, it increases human contact points with livestock as well as wildlife species. And here you can kind of see a nice diagram that's is it Raina Plower? Basically, a very prominent publisher or scientist in this area has put out with some colleagues, and this is effectively demonstrating. If you're familiar with Swiss cheese theory from NASA, it's that. And Swiss cheese theory is actually an engineering kind of concept, and that's basically when you're designing something like in their field, a spaceship, basically a rocket. You want to make a series of redundant systems that covers for one another on the assumption that one or several of them are going to fail. And those failures are represented as holes in any level here. And as far as relating to Swiss cheese, if you take a block of Swiss cheese and just hold it up and look at it, you probably won't be able to see through it unless it's very, very thin, because the solid areas of one layer cover up the holes of another. And basically, you can think of immunology and disease spread as a sort of biological, ecological Swiss cheese theory, in which you need a disease to basically be able to pass through all of these different layers to be able to infect a host. Like, for example, if you are eating a piece of meat, you'll probably cook it. That's one that's one layer of prevention right there. If you don't fully cook it, if something slips through the cracks, then you still have your stomach acid, and then from there you still have your intestinal mucosal immunity. And then from there, you still have immunity in your serum, in your blood, to take care of any potential pathogens that exist there. And you can view kind of these holes that a disease needs to get through as, in addition to that, a variety of kind of evolutionary mechanics of, is this even going to be a good fit for human populations, going to be able to sort of get into and infect their cells, that sort of thing. This is going back to some of my work on AMR, and this is just to show all the routes of spread that exist on sort of a human industry and agricultural industry, and also just ecological level, the ways that disease can spread between human and animal populations. And so you can see basically a bunch of different overlapping kind of shapes and circles and such. And things can spread via airborne routes, especially if they're arthropod-borne, and otherwise flying. Livestock heavily overlaps with humans as far as points of contact, as well as pets. And then you can see with that big arrow, waste is a huge way to disperse pathogens throughout, particularly the environment. Because then that goes into the water supply typically. It might be amended. It might be effectively fermented, heated to some degree to kill off certain pathogens or destroy certain biopharmaceutical agents that might be in that lot of feces, but that might not happen. And so you would have increased basically disease risk with that. And so it can go into the water, surface water, where it may be treated or not, depending on the sort of municipal systems of that locality. And it can go also to basically being manure for crop agriculture, and then that can kind of allow it to spread on via plants, allowing it to go to animals if that's going to be animal feed, or humans if that's going to be basically going to the human food supply. And typically bacteria are going to be a little bit more survivable in that sense, but you can also have some viral, specifically if it's, or especially if it's fecal oral, via that route of transmission. So why are we focusing so much on, we're talking about agriculture, why are we focusing so much on livestock specifically within agriculture? The number of pathogens that are shared between plants, humans, and animals, basically all of those domains, all of those what you call One Health domains, is less than the amount that is shared by just humans and animals, actually by quite a substantial amount. So right here you have Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and that's one of the few bacterial pathogens, as well as various Burkholderia species, at least compared to human-animal zoonoses and anthropozoonoses, that humans and animals and plants all share. And then there's also a variety of fungi that are shared. Not quite so, at least I haven't been able to find quite so many viruses, which are often the focus of disease spillover efforts. So other exacerbating factors, and we're going to get more into these. Agriculture is a very large portion of human activity. It is like the foundation of modern civilization, since it was first developed in the Fertile Crescent, 12 to 10,000 years before present, and it's continued to be that foundation. Agriculture, as well as particularly livestock, is also going to continue to increase in amount, in area, in scale, as time marches forward. So some other important considerations in some high-income areas, and basically what I'm trying to say here is that this isn't trying to sort of unnecessarily rag on animal agriculture. This is just one of many factors that this, as well as any other industry, needs to contend with. And agriculture being, again, kind of like the primary progenitor of civilization as we know it, is going to have kind of the highest importance and the most kind of interface points and some of the most considerations of really any industry as far as how to sort of optimize its operations via the large variety of ways in which it exists across the world, the large diversity of ways it exists. So in particularly high income areas, it's important to consider that exports for animal agricultural products give large amounts of protein as well as nutrition, or as well as nutrition writ large to low middle income areas, or LMICs. In those LMICs, livestock, especially ruminants, livestock, especially ruminant agriculture, can turn minimally productive land, like mountainsides, kind of semi-arid grasslands, into protein, into nutrients, and also generate a source of income. And this would be an entirely other presentation in and of itself, but it can potentiate or potentially increase gender equity given a variety of circumstances. And this is just a graph that demonstrates just for the United States, the variety of places that pork is exported to. And you can see among those a lot of LMICs like Mexico, China, and so on and so forth. We're going to look at the distribution of biomass on Earth. So we talked about how livestock and humans share a lot of, or domestic animals specifically, share a lot of diseases with one another. And we're gonna talk about just the scale of us versus them. So livestock is about 2 times more mass than humans, you can see from this graph. Animals are a pretty small portion of all biomass on Earth. Plants are going to be most of that. Cellulose, I believe, is the most abundant biochemical on Earth. Uh, yeah, so livestock, we've basically made them to be more than us in terms of biomass or on a biomass basis. So agriculture is a large portion of human activity, is what we're going to be talking about these next couple of slides. So one way to conceptualize that is just how much land does it take up? So land is approximately 30% of Earth's surface. About 71% of that's habitable, and about a little less than half of that's agriculture. Over 3/4 of that is for livestock. And think back to how much of that converted rainforest is turned into pasture land versus other agricultural uses, and that's why. You have a lot of land that you don't really need to manage too much, and that's why so much of it is for livestock as opposed to crop agriculture, row cropping, other considerations, other agricultural considerations. And when we look at specifically cropland, you can see all of that in orange right here. And a lot of the livestock operations tend to be kind of hovering around those areas as well, because that provides kind of these are in general sort of para-urban areas that are hinterlands and can provide kind of grain or what have you to finish these livestock operations, or finish these livestock and kind of fatten them up if these types of operations so choose. So agriculture, particularly animal agriculture, is an increasing portion of human activity. So this is GDP growth from across the world from 2018. Yeah, one of the interface options was covering that up. And so you can see you have these LMICs that are growing quite fast via the sort of coloration. And when we go to look at where livestock is growing, you can see that particularly China is a large meat producer and has been increasingly so over the past several decades. And a lot of that is correlated with GDP growth, as is the case with other countries that have really high GDP growth. And when you look at this is antimicrobial use in the animals, you see a lot of these LMICs, particularly the BRICS countries, if you're familiar with those, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have a lot of GDP growth, have a lot of increased animal agriculture, and have a lot of animal agriculture biopharmaceutical use. And one sort of indicator of that is how many antimicrobials are used in their production systems. And you can see that very readily with Brazil, with India, with China just lighting up here. And just to briefly compare that again to our disease spillover risk map, you can see a lot of correlates, or correlation, I guess, between those two maps. So now we're going to get into mitigating disease spillover risk. One way to do that one of the most primary ways to do that is with different agricultural practices. You can enhance biosecurity in animal husbandry, which is basically washing or having like as simple as having a foot dip or a boot dip at the door of whatever the animal enclosure is, so you're not tracking particularly fecal matter in and out of those operations or between pens, and you're basically kind of bioecologically or as far as disease spread considerations, infection control considerations, isolating different populations and not allowing disease to spread, spill over, adapt between different populations. Tied in pretty closely with that is improved veterinary care and reducing animal mortality as well. When you have animals that get sick, they are potentially in an immunocompromised state. They become kind of an incubator of disease. They die, they become even more of an incubator of disease because they don't have, when they're dead, they don't have an immune system to fight off anything anymore at all. So that's an important consideration, particularly or specifically in ruminant production. If you can take kind of the large amount of fecal matter they might be making and amend that, so heat it up, uh, fermented, what have you, um, and then use that to restore degraded pastures. That's a way to kind of decrease disease spillover risks. Um, in general, stopping the clearing and degradation of particularly tropical and subtropical forests, where you see a large amount of uh, biodiversity that can carry a large amount of or incubate a large amount of viral potential pathogens, and have those spill over. That's a good way to potentially prevent that. And as far as areas that are not tropical regions, they can, or jurisdictions that are in tropical regions, one way they've tried to have an impact on that is by restricting their imports of commodities that are linked to deforestation. I think the EU has done something to that effect. Um, Regulating wildlife markets and trade. This is one of those contentious, potentially political things because this represents kind of a traditional way of life for people, and typically want to be sort of respectful regarding that. That being said, just the level of risk that some of those livestock wet markets, or sorry, wildlife wet markets um, pose has caused some groups to say that we just need to pretty much ban these outright, or at least strictly regulate them. And then also improving health infrastructure, like human health infrastructure, in high risk or at risk communities. Um, that's another important one, and that's another kind of matter of economic development and just growing your healthcare workforce, and a couple of things that we're actually going to be getting into very soon. Uh, so mitigating spillover can also be done by early detection, or at least kind of various facets of spillover mitigation can be tackled by early detection, and a couple of different programs, uh, many academic, many government run notably, have done this over the past, at this point, 2 or so decades. Chiefly among them is USAID Predict, and that has been led by a large consortium of people, universities, nonprofits, uh, that have basically gone sort of into the jungles, if you will, and basically swabbed a variety of animals, particularly bats, as you can see here, for potential spillover pathogens, for potential viruses. And if you go on NCBI, on basically the National Institutes of Health's database for different species, for different microbial species, you can see that like a ton of different coronavirus species and other clades of viruses with pandemic potential have been discovered specifically by USAID Predict. Um, they can also discover, this is important because even if they don't find like a novel pathogen that's never been known to science before, they can also discover new locations of known pathogens. And that's happened before, I believe with Marburg virus in West Africa, as just one example. They can catalog potential agents, and this has been done, and then you can actually algorithmically make a way to sort of upload your sequence data for a newly discovered virus or for any given virus, and try and rank its pandemic potential via that. That's another thing that's been done out of I believe UC Davis, and maybe with some colleagues who were not UC Davis, but at least with some colleagues or with some researchers at UC Davis and their One Health Institute and College of Veterinary Medicine. And then also you can strengthen lab capacity by going out and testing in these localities that necessitates or at least suggests having strong laboratory infrastructure. As far as workforce pipelines, this is something I have a slightly more personal experience with. So it feels like a while ago now, but I used to be the president of what's called the International Student One Health Alliance. And that is exactly what it sounds like. It was an organization, or it is an organization that basically tries to sort of collate all different student groups, all different students with interest in One Health worldwide, and actually a significant number of those student groups were from were student groups that were basically set up with the help of efforts related to USAID Predict. And there's a variety of, there's like a constellation of USAID programming that I don't fully understand how they all interact, but you see all the stuff in blue here. That's what you call AfriHUN, or the African University One Health Network, or One Health University Network, rather. And then a lot of these other colors that you see in Southeast Asia are the Southeast Asian One Health University Network, or SAHUN. And these are all the different student groups that they sort of contributed to being part of the International Student One Health Alliance. And these are all student groups that basically are learning about, among other things, these pandemic threats, how to mitigate them, how to be laboratorians, how to be clinicians, any variety of health practitioners or scientists that can help mitigate the spread or prevent the spread of these sorts of zoonotic diseases. Then we get to kind of higher level considerations. Here is governance, is what you call it. Basically, us trying to develop systems for how we are going to prevent the spread of disease, or prevent, prepare, and respond more specifically. And this slide specifically is referring to the Global Pandemic Accord, or pandemic instruments, called a couple different things. And that's something that the WHO International Negotiating Body, or INB, has been working on for the past like 2 years. Another thing that's kind of a subject of controversy. And it basically is trying to work out, among many other things, vaccine kind of rights, sharing privileges, and how to spread resources as far as preparedness and response once you have created a vaccine. Just a ton of different factors that you need for pandemic preparedness and response is what they're trying to work out. They've given themselves, as of this past World Health Assembly, which was just last month, 1 more year to try and hash this out. But particularly between high income and low middle income countries, there's been a lot of difficulty reaching consensus on how to allocate what do you call it, like patent rights, basically with biopharmaceuticals, with the vaccines, because you have companies that necessarily are going to put a lot of time and effort and money into developing these things, and want to see a return on that investment, and that's mostly going to be coming from high income countries, that return on investment. So you want to make sure that you're not sort of sequestering that disease prevention apparatus to those areas as a matter kind of equity, but as a matter of basic economics, it's kind of difficult to work that out. So that's one of the many things they're working on right now. A really big so this is bringing us to the end of our presentation here. I really want to shout out all the people who help contribute to all these different documents and reports and research articles and so on and so forth, because these were kind of the main sources of this presentation. Chief among them are people like Billy Koresh, William Koresh, Catherine Machallan, but if they're okay with me shouting them out, basically. I believe each of them are in at least these reports here. And then a ton of research articles, of course, went into this as well, but these are kind of the main kind of fallbacks that I leaned on to get an insight and understanding of how these issues all work. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Neil. That was very informative, and a lot of very good information. As you mentioned just at the start, biodiversity, and I subscribe to Lexology, and one of their recent articles was with respect to biodiversity being lacking in a lot of corporate ESG maneuvers, and what are they doing to counteract that or account for it, really. So yeah, if we have some questions, feel free to type them in the chat or kind of raise your hand. We did ask a couple of questions were asked with respect to the video. We will be sharing the presentation. It takes a little bit to get that out once the thing's over. And then Neil, if you'll send me your slides, I'll get them put in PDF format when we send out the slide or the information on the presentation. We'll also send out the slides.
Excellent.
Do you find, let's see, I don't see any questions, right? But if you have questions, feel free to chat. Do you find that, and I enjoy the One Health, as I said, I think you may have heard Purdue's actually opening up a One Health Institute in Indianapolis with Elanco. Do you find that the struggle, and you mentioned a little bit, was cultural? Is the struggle not being able to get these entities across different countries to line up and choosing what the appropriate methods for addressing these spillover effects are?
To the best of my understanding, there can be. One of the biggest things concerning that I see come up in the conversation is data sharing and data transparency. And that's something that to the best of my understanding, has actually been an issue with the current high path avian influenza outbreak. You just have this kind of conflict of interests effectively with personal privacy and then what you might call the public good. And you want to keep things sort of disidentifiable as much as possible. But just as a matter of epidemiology, you do want to be able to pinpoint kind of a time and a place, which therefore can likely be pinpointed to, depending on how specific you are, a specific person. Go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought you were finished. Sorry. So we got a question there. When you get done, I'll read it out loud just so everybody can hear it.
Okay. And then when you just kind of scale it to a national level, it can become a matter of national security, if not national security, maybe national pride. And then you get like all of the politics involved in that, and that can be very difficult to kind of wade through. So that's kind of the first thing that comes to my mind, at least when you bring up the things you kind of mentioned.
Yeah, very good. All right, here's the question here. And so can you comment on the One Health workforce considering a potential emerging shortage of veterinary medical educators, as this requires the profession to acknowledge and understand the factors leading to this outcome? Expanding class size within existing schools and colleges and expected expansion of new programs seeking AVMA-COE accreditation have heightened the need to address an impending shortage, and they do provide a link there. So how about that one? Because that's not my bailiwick.
This is a really great question. As it pertains, I'm seeing, I didn't even see all the questions. I didn't scroll down very far. This is from Dr. Larimore. Perfect. Great to have you here. So in the United States, and honestly, you might know more about this than me, a lot of that expansion may be attributed to the expansion of among other things, pet ownership, and certainly that's related or piece of these zoonotic pathogenic transfers that we're talking about. But at least how I conceptualize these things, it's not the most immediately connected thing. But honestly, this may be an area where I still need to learn. And if you have anything else you want to add to your question, I'd be very happy to hear about that. It's sort of on a more global scale, you do see, and this is actually a project I'm currently working on, and we don't have nearly final data yet. But from what I can sort of piece together, you do have a pretty large expanse of veterinary education globally, particularly in Brazil. And when you go on Brazil's Ministry of Education website, they list like 500 programs. It literally goes up by the week, or at least by the month. It's pretty crazy. and they do have like a pretty large expansion of like their beef sector, and just like many other rapidly developing areas, meat consumption in general, as a growing economy, probably pet ownership and the desire to care for one's pets, potentially in the sort of capacity of a family member, as you have like in the United States in some cases or in many cases. Um, in other areas of the globe that are, and even in places like the United States, you do see this rising recognition of the importance of veterinary paraprofessionals. And I know that, at least in the United States, what might be referred to as mid-level practitioners in human medicine and veterinary medicine, particularly from the perspective of those health professionals that have those 4-year postgraduate degrees, can be like a pretty contentious issue. But particularly in places like the most kind of disparately kind of poor areas of the world, that's going to constitute a large part of um, a really significant part of your healthcare infrastructure for animals, at least. Um, and that's why the World Veterinary Association, the FAO, and WOA as well have been giving kind of a large focus to those areas, or growing focus to those areas, even though kind of traditionally the uh, sort of paragons, I suppose, of those professions have been veterinarians with professional veterinary degrees. Does that kind of address what you're getting at?
I would assume if not type in the chat or raise your hand, we'll call. We got a couple more questions. I know we're bumping up against time, but if you got time, Neil, to answer them, we'll try to get them answered. One is from Dylan Ross, and then I'll do both of them. You kind of answer them as you want. One, what governmental cooperative efforts are in place or being developed to respond to pandemic level emergency on the scale of COVID-19 for an animal pathogen like avian flu, resulting in the mass destruction of flocks, massive infection, question mark. And then, Allison, I apologize if I'm going to mispronounce your last name, Sakara. International, when this might be a comment related to what you discussed previously, international data boundaries limit the exchange, sharing, and transmission of data, including personalized data between countries and region. The financial sector, yeah, has been dealing with these restrictions for many years. But since the advent of COVID, these restrictions have now increasingly impacted all hazards, One Health, One Nature data sharing. So that, I guess, addresses kind of the point you were talking about before we got to the previous question. So if you want to address the one about governmental cooperative efforts, we'll make that kind of the last one. But Neil, if you want to share your email kind of at the end, if people have other questions they might want to ask, they can reach out. But if you'll answer that question, we'll make this one kind of the last one to answer. And then if people have questions, they can chat with you.
Excellent. Yeah, and I've just put my email in the chat. Oh, I think I just sent it to you. I'll send it to everyone else as well. But as far as government cooperative efforts, there's actually really no shortage of things that kind of at least get at what you're talking about. One of the biggest ones for like zoonotic threats is going to be WAHIS. That's coordinated by the World Organization for Animal Health, or WOA, and that's basically a just data sharing or information sharing mechanism for reporting animal diseases to the rest of the 183 WOA member countries, as well as I mean, you can just look it up online too. So you don't necessarily have to be sort of a member country to get some of the information at least. And then there's also, I can't believe I'm forgetting what this is called. It's the I'll have to get back to you about this, but it was set up in like 2006 between uh, maybe it was just the FAO and it was either 2 of 3 or 3 of the WHO, FAO, and what is now WOA, formerly OIE, and it's basically a data sharing mechanism for zoonotic diseases, or diseases that are of pandemic potential. So there's a ton of different mechanisms that kind of get at what you're talking about. And it's actually like kind of a bit to sort through if you get into it. But very good question. As far as
Michael provided one there, USG coordination, National One Health Framework. He provided a link there as well.
oh, perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Michael. And I think you had mentioned, I'll comment on this one because I've gotten this question asked a couple of times with respect to avian flu. The USDA and the FDA actually have different, even though both of them address it, USDA can show up on a farm operation. FDA is not allowed on a farm operation because they control the food aspect of it once it leaves the farm and gets to the processor. So that I've gotten a couple emails to me, and again, if anybody is wants to write up a little thought piece, I'd be happy to share it with our listserv and put it on our LinkedIn page with respect to why those two organizations have different. I understand it a little bit, so don't let me. But why those two organizations have much different regulatory aspects with respect to that. So I think that's a concern. How can if we know it's on the farm and we're worried about food, why can't FDA and USDA both show up or get together? And obviously, there's a lot of political implications in there that I don't want to get into, but just understanding that, I don't think people have the general public, when I say people, general public doesn't have a very good understanding of that.
Yeah, it's and honestly, some of the people that probably work in that don't have the most intimate understanding of it either, and a lot of it's like institutional inertia, of course, and how things were started back in the day. But yeah, it can all seem very confusing looking at it like now.
Well, I know we're bumped up against time. Neil, sorry for the confusion getting you on earlier, and I apologize for that, but we had a good attendance. I thank everybody for jumping on. Neil, I enjoyed the presentation. If you'll send your presentation to Marcy and I, we'll get it put in a PDF format and distribute it to everybody. Neil did provide his email in the chat. If you have some specific questions, and then he can probably, when he needs to put his USDA hat on, he can probably put his USDA hat on and answer from those questions as well. But again, he made this presentation from a personal perspective and wanted everybody to be aware of that. And I appreciate that he was providing his views with respect to that solely. But great topic. We enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. If you're interested in doing a July or August webinar for us, please reach out to Marcy and I. We'd love to have you. We love the diversity in topics and individuals from all different backgrounds being able to contribute. But thank you very much, Neil. Thanks to everybody for the questions. We hope you all have a wonderful day.
Yes, thank you. And briefly, I want to say that is GLUES Plus, the Global Early Warning System for Major Animal Diseases, including zoonoses, is that thing from 2006. But yes, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Bye.